Thanks for being here. Subscribe to Cheating Stories Best, so you don't miss new stories.
Wife lacked thrills and decided to find them with the help of. Today's story has a similar plot. Enjoy it! At what point does love stop being beautiful and become something painful? She was the closest thing to a goddess that existed on earth. Everything about her was joy, peace, and happiness. Wherever she went, she found beauty. To her, the city lights were as beautiful as the sunrises, and a bag fluttering in the wind had the same grandeur as leaves fluttering in the breeze. Everything she touched became better. Everyone she met felt honored, even if they were with her for just a moment. She was so sweet, they said, so kind, so beautiful and sincere, warm like her golden brown eyes in the sunset light. His eyes were blue, icy cold, intense, a blue so dark it was almost a new color. They were focused eyes, hard eyes that penetrated her tenderness. They took it all in, noticing details that tried to slip away and hide like bugs, only to be discovered by a hand moving a stone as if it were nothing. Most of all, they absorbed it, all of her, every gentle curve of her perfect body, every sparkling smile, every breath, every inch of skin. At least, that's how I imagined them together. Susie, I downed my wine, startled by the sudden touch of Mina's hand on my forearm. The glass broke, and red wine scattered across the tablecloth. Natasha! I screamed. There was no need for such noise. The liquid would not even dream of staining Mina's wedding dress. Not a drop came within a foot of her, preferring to soak into the immaculate tablecloth and drip onto the skirt of my own lavender bridesmaid dress. However, Natasha screamed, Mina sighed, and the wedding guests collectively turned their heads toward me as if commanded by a hive. Natasha jumped between Mina and me, acting as a bodyguard against the bloody red wine stain threatening the immaculate dress that hugged Mina's flawless body. Silence hung in the hall. I didn't dare look at Axel, but I felt those intense eyes watching me from the other side of the main table. Sorry, my voice trembled, not from nerves, but because it always trembled. Of course, I was forgiven. No one wants to be the one who almost ruins the bride's wedding dress. There was a moment when I thought she might do something, a moment I didn't give her enough credit. Her eyes flashed, her jaw clenched. I imagined how she would scream at me, tell everyone who I was and what I had done. I was mistaken. Always graceful, Mina laughed loudly. It's nothing, she said in a melodious voice. Even if it was something, it's just a dress. Muttered whispers returned to the room as people looked away. Natasha moved away at the slightest touch of Mina's hand, and then she placed a comforting hand on my shoulder. I just wanted to ask if you're okay, she continued. You look so lost, like when you write. I doubted I had that look, but Mina gave me a chance to leave. Just dreaming, I thought I could, find inspiration. Mina's face lit up. A poem, maybe, she suggested. Oh, Susie, that would be wonderful. I hope you'll write about us. Please, if you write about me and Axel, you'll share it with us, right? I nodded, although that was about as likely as sharing the details of the nap she had interrupted. However, that strange creeping feeling came over me again, and I knew Axel was looking in my direction. I risked a glance as the waiter ran over to wipe away the wine, and in fact, Axel's gaze was directed at me. His lips twitched slightly in a half-smile when I met his gaze. He knows. I forced a smile through trembling lips and looked away, rubbing at the red stain on my skirt with a damp napkin. He doesn't know, I told myself. This is impossible. He can hear your thoughts, impossible. I said it out loud. Miss? Asked the waiter. I coughed, trying to make it sound like I was laughing. Sorry, I need more, sorry. I felt Axel's gaze on me as I walked to the toilet, but when I looked back, he was leaning in to kiss Mina with a smile on his face, focused only on her. I didn't want to be with him. When I met him, we took the same courses, screenwriting and studies in literature and film. I was a year older than him, and we had different majors, so crossing paths was unlikely to begin with. But I missed the memo from the universe that this was a sign. It's not that I didn't notice him, everyone noticed. Half the women in our courses melted because he was dark and silent, a mysterious enigma, a beautiful martyr artist whose secrets were buried beneath the carved lines of his statuesque face. The other half melted because he was an athlete. His body was as toned as his face was perfect. He seemed interested in none of them. Some tried to seduce him with low-cut blouses and flirtatious swings of their hair. Others tried to engage his mind by discussing films and the greatness of pioneers such as Dreyer. They were the embodiment of a woman who came and went, speaking of Michelangelo as if he were a patient under the ether, like yellow smoke drifting down the street. They all wanted to know his secrets. They all wanted to be the woman who would win his attention, pave the way to his heart, and make him reveal the secrets of his soul to them. Except me. He seemed boring to me. Oh, another artistic romantic in a black sweater, carrying a canvas bag over his shoulder and with a stupid, pretentious name, Axel Pierce, as if his parents knew he would be a grim old soul. Another college student with longish hair and pouty lips, a permanent scowl on his face as he reflected on the unfairness of life, the illusion of freedom, and the lack of inspiration in the world. Another tormented creature standing amid the noise of the stormy sea, wondering if all we see or seem to be is just a dream within a dream. He tired me out, frightening and unattainable. He sat alone in class, either not noticing or ignoring the girls who cast longing glances in his direction. I thought I was above this, more than this, too good to be a cliché like everyone else. So what if I'm a student poet? So what if I dressed in black scarves, black shirts, black jeans, and black hair? I didn't need to be completely cliché and obsessed with this brooding creature sitting in the corner. As it turned out, Axel was just quiet and not very good at making friends. I learned this when he and I were asked to be peer review partners in a screenwriting class. At first, I considered it a failure. Rolling my eyes, I sank into the chair next to him, glaring at the professor as he waited for everyone to pair up. "I'm Susie," I said. "Axel," came the resonant answer. I tapped my fingers on the table twice. "I'm pretty critical when it comes to reviewing, so don't expect me to be lenient with you." "And you shouldn't, that would defeat the whole point." I turned my head and found myself trapped in his gaze, like a spider under glass, mesmerized by the strange color of his eyes and the depth of his stare. Then the professor spoke. I turned away and forgot about that moment. I found him to be almost surprisingly articulate, thoughtfully receptive, and irritatingly silent. When we first exchanged review assignments, I was struck by the story of cold revenge. His main character was horribly abused, mistreated by everyone who was supposed to love her, but she did nothing. I felt angry at her, irritated by her inaction, until she methodically destroyed the people around her. Every word was golden. This scoundrel wrote better than I could ever dream of. "You're going to be a great screenwriter," I told him when I gave him his assignment back. "I want to be a video editor," came the muffled reply. It was almost sad that he didn't want to use such talent. Gradually, Axel and I became acquaintances, not friends, really, not much more than people who nodded hello as they passed each other on campus. As the semester progressed, however, we became those acquaintances who met up to study or discuss ideas in the library, and then those who went to the campus bar for drinks after a midterm exam. "You should meet my roommate," I told him. "Why?" "I think you'll like her." He didn't shrug, nod, say yes, no, or maybe. His eyebrow twitched, which was the most reaction I could have hoped for. I didn't think my roommate would really like him, but she had just broken up with her boyfriend, and I was desperately trying to find her a one-night stand so she would stop moping around the apartment. It was more for her benefit than mine. I hated to see her sad. When Mina entered the bar, Axel's gaze immediately went to her. He watched as she walked quietly through the crowd, people parting like reeds to let her pass, an aura of calm spreading behind her until she reached us. "This is my roommate, Mina." "Mina, this is my classmate Axel." None of them heard me. I had never seen Axel smile. Actually, that day, I watched his face break into a smile like a flower opening for the first time in the sun, feeling the first magnificent rays on its silken petals and finally understanding its purpose. 2 people fell in love that day, and I was one of them. I denied that I fell in love. Axel spent hours that seemed like days and days that seemed like eternities in our apartment. Hours, days, months, their love did not develop over time. The seed was not planted and tended until it took root, sprouted, and blossomed. No, their love was dandelions, one moment they were gone, and the next, they took over everything. And lucky for me, I was the one who blew the feathers. Day after day, Axel was with us in the morning when I woke up and after each lesson when I returned. He was a better roommate than Mina, even though he didn't actually live with us. I would never say anything bad about Mina. The constant presence of her yoga mat stretched out in the middle of the living room, where the coffee table would have been, and her thick hair clogging our shower was a small price to pay for her friendship. At first, I took it logically. He was attractive, I told myself. It was physical attraction, nothing more. Childhood love, daydreaming. You can recognize Michelangelo's statue of David as attractive and know that it doesn't mean you're in love. After the first few weeks of their relationship, Mina sat down with me one evening, before Axel had started spending the night, when it was still just Mina and I, when I was taking a break from seeing his face every time I turned around. You don't mind if I date Axel, right? I suddenly looked up at her. Why should I object? She bit her lip, eyes wide and vulnerable, and remained silent. She knows he's yours, don't worry. But I'm in love with him. I'm not in love with him, I said. Don't worry, Mina looked at me sadly and silently. She hears you. I laughed at this, causing Mina to have a strange expression on her face. She couldn't hear me, I told myself. It's overly paranoid, even for me. The silence dragged on, becoming even more awkward. What if she hears you? You and Axel are a wonderful couple, I said. You are perfect for each other. Her face brightened, waves of radiant delight overwhelming her and filling our small kitchen. I really like him, she said. I mean, I really like him. I swallowed a lump of irritation and another lump of guilt. Mina was perfect, she didn't deserve my evil thoughts. I had my chance with Axel, I didn't use it. I didn't need him. That weekend was the first time he spent the night with us. They tried to be quiet, which made everything even worse, knowing how hard they tried to muffle their sounds for my sake. The walls absorbed the sound of Mina's high-pitched screams, Axel's low breathing, the rhythmic pounding of her bed against our shared wall, and squeezed every noise into my ears as I lay in bed. I tried to convince myself that the tingling that started in my heart and seeped through my bones was embarrassment or maybe irritation that they hadn't asked me to leave for the night so I wouldn't have to hear it. When I came out of my bedroom the next morning and found Axel sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee, I tried to smile. He looked up at me, eyes patiently focused, and asked, "How did you sleep?" "Okay," I said. No, he nodded once, wildly, stoically. "Fine." Mina cheerfully ran into the kitchen from the corridor. "Good morning," she exclaimed, her voice bright and soft. "Would you like some pancakes?" I was thinking of making pancakes this morning. I love pancakes. I was adamant that I didn't feel anything for Axel, so I said yes and ate breakfast with them. I didn't admit to myself that I was in love with him until one night I heard him say it, his voice as quiet as a pebble falling into a lake, rolling over the walls. "I love you, Mina." My heart sank and squeezed and cracked, and I could see them. I could see him. I could see his lips moving as he spoke, his dark blue eyes fixed on her face and her face only. I didn't love him until she beat him. I didn't love him until he looked at her as if she were the only woman in the world. I loved him, and he loved her, and I cried. We were with friends, other friends. Their faces became blurry in my memory, smooth and plastic and unimportant. In my memories, I only remembered Mina, Axel, and Natasha. Probably because I wasn't paying attention. I dreamed, always dreamed, and the dream that took over every moment of day and night was Axel. I remember this dream. I was imagining his body. Specifically, that day Axel wore a dark gray knitted sweater, very artist-like, not at all like his real personality. He often wore sweaters, usually with high collars, because he was always cold. That was the only complaint I remember from Mina, and it wasn't even a real complaint. His hands were just cold, and she took them between hers, trying to warm them up. Such a small action, so beautiful. His sweater didn't have a high collar that day. It was a round neckline, and I remember it because I looked at his Adam's apple and wondered if he liked being kissed on the neck. This led to wondering if he liked being kissed in other places, which led to imagining what his chest looked like under the sweater, whether he had that muscle line on his ribs that some guys have, and whether he had a pronounced V-shaped line on his stomach pointing under the waistband of his black jeans. AJ Sal, Natasha said, blinking at me. What? She burst out laughing. Must be deep thoughts, that's her look as a writer, Mina correctly noted. Have you been thinking about a story or a poem, Susie? A poem about Axel's body. You undressed him in your mind, Natasha teased. She knew I hadn't done it. I tried to sound highly offended and slightly dignified, but the redness spreading across my face gave me away. We all know what you were thinking, Natasha continued. Stop, Natasha. Seriously, just stop. Please stop. Stop it. Seriously, Mina said. Was it logical to connect Mina's words with my thoughts? No. Did it stop the intrusion of the idea that they could hear what I was hiding in my mind, that they knew what I was thinking, that they knew that the only thing I was thinking about was Axel? Also no. It was crazy. Crazy. It was wrong. I was wrong. I was sick. My mind was flickering feverishly, turning on and off like a libertine kiss. He was telling me that they knew. It didn't help when I looked up and saw his eyes of ice, completely focused on me, penetrating my mind and my soul, reaching into those dark corners where the rotting moss of obsession had invaded my thoughts like dandelions. I noticed when he started imitating some of my mannerisms. Of course, I noticed because I was aware when I did it myself. It started one night when Mina was cooking dinner for the three of us. So, she said easily, although butterflies pounded her words, making them shake with nerves, Axel and I wanted to discuss something with you. They know. I tapped my fingers on the table 6 times, twice with your thumb, twice with your middle finger, twice with your index finger. What's happened? My voice trembled. Neither of them noticed anything unusual, chalking up my fragility to my usual shaky tone rather than the tornado of panic raging in my throat. Mina sat down at the table next to me, opposite Axel. She was going to tell me that she knew I was in love with Axel. She was going to say that she knew I was listening to them make love. She was going to call me creepy, obsessive, and disgusting, and tell me to leave and never talk to them again. And the worst part of it all was that I would never see Axel again. And oh God, wasn't that the problem all along? My chin trembled, and I tapped my fingers again. Knock, 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 knock. Well, you know, Axel and I have been together for almost a year now. Has it really been almost a year? I tried not to look straight and just nodded. Knock, 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 knock. And we were thinking maybe, if you don't mind. Oh my God, I thought. Maybe Axel could, move in with us? Her voice rose at the end, part questioning, part pleading. Well, yeah. I mean, if you want to move, you can, but I really don't want you to leave. Axel looked at me. I knew he was watching. I felt his gaze as if his nails were scratching my bare arms. I didn't look at him. I couldn't look at him. Knock, 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 knock. We'll split the rent between the 3 of us, and the utilities too. Her tone was strange, as if she didn't think she'd have to convince me. This was not the Mina I knew, although perhaps I was imagining it. I was, of course, absorbed in my own thoughts. Is waking up every morning knowing that Axel is in bed just a few feet from mine, albeit on the other side of the wall, worth saving a few hundred a month? Is it worth it knowing that I will see his face morning and evening? That there is no escape except to close the bedroom door? He will be here all the time, will use the same bathroom as me, will be without anything seconds before me, will eat, breathe, and sleep in the same space as me. He will always be there, my tormentor, my love, while I watch him be with someone else. It will be excruciating agony, constant torture. A few hundred a month in savings, and all it will cost is my sanity. Of course, I had already given that away for free, so the decision was simple. Of course, I said. That's a great idea. Knock, 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 knock. Mina's face lit up, and I smiled back at her, fake and forced, unbalanced. I knew you'd say yes. Thank you, she said. Mina hugged me from her chair, warm and smooth like comforting lobster water. "Honey, when do you want to move?" I accidentally glanced at Axel and became lost in the ice when he looked back. "Next week," he said, and his fingers mirrored mine on the table. Knock, 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 knock. I started looking for a job, something that could supplement my modest income from writing. I applied to publishing houses and newspapers, then bookstores and libraries, and eventually got a job as a salesperson in a fine art store near campus. My lack of knowledge about brushes and canvases wasn't a problem. Most customers thought they knew more than the people behind the counter, and that was true in my case. Mina worked part-time as a yoga instructor while she was studying and started doing it full-time after graduating. Her goal was to open her own studio, and she was on her way to it. People loved Mina. She had a loyal following and just needed the initial investment to branch out and start her own business. Within a few months, Axel landed his dream job. He was hired by a local hockey team as a junior video editor and quickly became his boss's top assistant. I got promoted from salesperson to key manager, so that was nice. 6 months after his graduation, I walked into our apartment after work one evening and saw Mina standing in the living room. The apartment was full of hot, explosive energy that seemed to emanate from where she stood. "Susie," she screamed as soon as I entered. Her eyes sparkled, bright and crazy and completely captivating. "What?" I asked impatiently, giving into her energy. She burst into tears, spun in place, and could not contain her excessive joy, expressed in an electric dance. I did everything as expected. I hugged her and squealed with delight, grabbing her left hand and gasping at the bulky stone adorning her finger. I gasped in theatrical surprise and hugged her again when she asked me to be a bridesmaid. I fully obliged and told her how honored I was. When Axel came out of the bedroom a few minutes later, I teased him good-naturedly, congratulated him, and found myself in the awkward position of not knowing if I should hug him too. Before I could decide, Axel had his arms around me, his chest pressed against mine. Then he let me go. I stepped back and laughed. It sounded crazy to my ears, but Mina and Axel didn't notice. Instead, they insisted on having a celebratory drink with me. I drank that sickly sweet sparkling wine and pretended to be tired. "It's been a long day," I said. "A big order arrived today. It's time for me to sleep. Don't make any noise, you two lovebirds." They didn't get any quieter, and I couldn't help but cry the whole time. When they finished, I wiped the tears from my face and started looking for a new place to live. Absence makes the heart grow fonder, and obsession grows stronger. I shouldn't have thought that leaving Axel would help me get through this. If anything, it only made the situation worse. I conveniently forgot that I had fallen in love with him even before he moved in with Mina and me. I told myself that moving would be a good idea, that it would be the cure for my poor, unhealthy mind. My new home was a basement 2 blocks from work. It was small, dark, and old. Being in the basement, it should have been constantly cold, but instead, it was stuffy. The air hung like a spider's web, thick with heat. Walking from the bedroom to the kitchen felt like swimming. Even opening the windows didn't help. The air was as much a part of my apartment as the walls, floors, and lamps. When Mina and Axel helped me unload the boxes and furniture I had taken, I was full of hope. This continued until we finished bringing my things in and found ourselves surrounded by towers of cardboard, which crushed my hopes. Mina wiped the dust from her hands. "Don't cry," she said. "I'll just miss you." Her voice sounded unusually quiet. "If you ever need a place to stay, you know you're always welcome." I knew. She hugged me tightly, and my heart sank. Over the years, she had been the closest thing I had to a sister, my closest friend. It was a testament to how much I loved her that even though she was with Axel, I never felt resentment toward her. I also didn't feel resentment toward him for loving her. After Mina released me, I smiled. I continued to smile as Axel took her place, smiling, trying not to notice the sweat and cologne on him. I smiled even though my body tingled and my heart ached when we parted. "I'll miss you," he said. "Yes," I answered, barely audible. He looked at me with a strange expression. When they left, I sank onto the fluffy sofa that we had dragged down the stairs and covered my face with my hands. I could feel him on me, the ghost of his cologne and sweat clinging to my shirt. He said he would miss you, Mina suggested, and maybe we could meet at least once a week? I always said yes at first. Axel was there every time, and the more often he was there, the more I convinced myself that he knew exactly what was going on in my head at any given moment. The more I convinced myself of this, the more silent I became around him until I found myself answering questions only in my mind. "How are you doing?" he asked once. "This is terrible," I thought. "I'm unhappy and I miss you." There was a long pause. "Ah, Susie," he said. "Sorry, I thought everything was fine." He looked at me, nodded a little, and then looked at Mina to continue the conversation. I stopped seeing him so often after that. Sometimes he was there when we met, sometimes he wasn't. When he was there, it wasn't my Axel, not the Axel I was obsessed with. He seemed withdrawn, more tense than usual, and there was still a small part of me sane enough to assume it was because he thought I was crazy. It was the night a few months before the wedding when everything changed. "Where is Axel today?" I asked when Mina entered the bar at work. She answered easily, "He says hi." The evening felt like old times, the times before Axel, when Mina and I would just chat and laugh. We drank a lot and ordered fried snacks, chatting about all sorts of things. For a while, I wasn't obsessed. I wasn't sick. I was just Susie. Even when she started talking about marriage, I was fine. I was fine up until the moment she smiled sadly, took a sip of her drink, and tilted her head to the left, looking at me. "Are you okay, Susie?" "Yes, why?" She leaned forward. "I mean really okay. You seem different." "Different? What could have been different?" I had been obsessed with her now fiancé for years. Nothing changed except the fact that I hardly saw him anymore, and I was miserable because of it. I should have just left it all behind, but instead, my messed up mind insisted on making me remember what he sounded like and what he smelled like when he carried boxes. "Susie," I continued to look at her, and Mina looked worried, very worried. "Susie, what's wrong?" she asked. "Sorry," I said. "I'm fine. I mean, yeah, I seem different. I'm living alone for the first time, and I miss you." She laughed uncertainly. "Okay, well, it's better than me, I guess. Better than her." "What's wrong?" "I'm worried about Axel," Mina whispered. "Because of the wedding, just in general. We fight more often now," she admitted, looking down. "We argue." "Are Axel and Mina fighting?" I asked quietly. She shrugged, still not looking at me. "You know how sometimes people get really upset, like really, really upset, and it's not. I mean, you know it's not their fault they get upset." The sip I took turned to gravel in my mouth. Pebble after pebble of worry filled my stomach as I considered what she was asking. He couldn't be my Axel. He was gentle. He wasn't capable of, it was impossible. "Mina, please don't tell anyone," she begged. "I'm so ashamed. I don't know who else to talk to, Susie. I just can't. I didn't want to." "Is he hurting you?" I asked. She stopped, her eyes widening. "No," she cried. No. He never would." "How could you, Susie?" I pressed. "He wouldn't. He would never hit me." "I know," I said hastily. You sounded like..." She began to laugh, her tone ringing and shaking her head. No, I understand why you might think that. He's not like that. He loves me." I nodded, but I wasn't sure if I believed her. 2 weeks before the wedding, Mina and Axel invited everyone in the wedding party to their place for dinner. I didn't know if word of my strange behavior had spread to everyone or if I was particularly withdrawn that night, but I ended up next to Axel on the couch as the party continued without us. "Are you okay?" I finally asked. "Yes," he replied, keeping his head straight but glancing at me briefly. He did not move and continued to look at Mina. "You're sure?" I asked, noticing his larynx twitch slightly as he swallowed. "I am fine," he said. I turned my head toward him. You have a scratch on your neck. This caught his attention. He looked away from Mina and touched the thin line that ran from his ear to the collar of his sweater. As soon as he moved his hand, I saw Mina glance in our direction, her shoulders tense. Here? He asked. Yes, it happened while I was getting my hair cut. His hand shook slightly as he spoke. I looked at him with disbelieving eyes. Oh, Axel, I said quietly. He's lying. There was something lurking in the depths of his eyes that made me shiver, something cold, something not quite balanced, something familiar. Are you okay? He asked. Yes, I replied, my finger moving spontaneously on my thigh. Knock, knock, knock. Axel's fingers echoed the movement almost unconsciously, and a chill of uncertainty ran down my spine. Something has changed, I said. What? He asked, looking at me. Something's wrong. What's wrong? I pressed. He didn't say anything, but there was something, just a little something, hiding under his eyes. For a split second, it wasn't guilt, anger, or danger. It was something familiar, something wounded, something threatening to get out of control. That's how I know it, I said. Axel, if there's something... He interrupted, forget it. You're wrong. Yes, but it's not. Susili's voice was barely a whisper. I'm getting married next month. He knows. I'm happy for you and him. He knows, Axel said. He knows. He knows. Okay, I said. Well, I'm glad you're okay. He didn't say anything, so I stood up, said goodbye to Mina, and left. Apart from my memories, I didn't see him again until the wedding. After nearly spilling wine on Mina's wedding dress and causing the waiter to look at me like I was unstable, which I was, but that was beside the point, I cleaned my dress as best I could. Natasha burst into the bathroom while I was drying a cloth under the hand dryer. Mina and Axel are going to have a toast, she chattered. They're just waiting for you. Are you okay? She asked. Fine, I said, though I wasn't okay in any way. Mentally, ethically, morally, I wasn't good. I'm fine, I repeated. The stain on the skirt of my dress was barely noticeable, just a dark stain sprayed on my thigh. It was almost invisible. Natasha sounded friendly, but I knew it was an act. I could tell that she hated me, that she knew how wrong it was for me to be there, that she saw my thoughts and knew what scared me so much. I didn't look at her, I looked but didn't really see. I returned to my chair, took a sip from my newly refilled glass of wine, and waited. A few moments later, the sound of knives on glass echoed throughout the hall as Mina and Axel stood up. They made all the right gestures, embarrassed hand-waving, playful reluctance, a long and loving kiss that elicited exclamations and gasps, before walking up to the microphone set up next to the table. Axel stood silently next to Mina while she spoke. She was eloquent and sweet, thanking her parents for paying for the wedding, Axel's parents for their support, and all the guests who had traveled from afar to celebrate their union. She described their future together as a wonderful, ideal life. Then she mentioned me. I have to especially thank one of my bridesmaids, Mina said. Not that you all weren't absolutely wonderful, but Susili, can you stand up for a second? Oh my God. She was going to tell everyone. She knew I was in love with Axel, that I thought about them making love, that I was obsessed and weird and wrong. Susili, I looked at her, my nerves on edge. Mina gently motioned for me to stand up. I clumsily rose to my feet, tense and ready to run away the moment she revealed my secrets. If you don't know my best friend, Susili Larch, you're missing out. Susili is the sweetest, kindest, most caring person I know. She's a brilliant, creative, and incredibly talented poet, Mina beamed as she looked at me from where she stood. And if it weren't for Susili, neither of us would be here today. Susili, thank you for introducing me to the love of my life. You brought Axel and me together, and I am so grateful for that. You're welcome, I said, my voice trembling. Raise your glasses to my beautiful bridesmaid, Susili. I clumsily raised my hand in the air and waved to all the guests. Warmth surged through me, igniting my bones, burning my muscles, and staining my skin. I needed to hug her now. Move your legs. Mina opened her arms as I hurried towards her. She hugged me as flashes of cameras captured the moment, like mice in traps. She hugged me and turned her head to whisper in my ear. "Thank you so much. Love you to bits." "And I love you," I replied, swallowing hard, trying to convince myself that the emotions eating me up inside were happiness and joy, not horror. "I owe you everything." Axel's voice was quiet but not devoid of emotion. I tilted my head back to meet his gaze. "I'm happy for you both," I whispered. It would have been strange if I hugged Mina and didn't hug Axel. I forced myself not to linger, not to shake, to look normal, act normal, be normal for at least 5 seconds. Suzulie, everyone is watching. For a moment, just a moment, a beautiful, clear, sane moment, I thought everything would be okay. But the wind came again, destroying the wall I had built because it was no longer needed. He loved her, she loved him. What more could I want for the man I loved and my best friend? They were happy, and I wasn't. But maybe one day I would be. It was like a fog lifting, as if the world had become brighter, as if the dandelions had been cut and cleaned, and I could breathe. I could think. I wasn't crazy, Suzulie. I was just me. Nobody could read my mind. What paranoid nonsense. I looked at Mina. Axel stood next to her, his hand resting on the podium, the gold ring on his finger glistening as he tapped his fingers. Knock, knock, knock. My jaw twitched in response to the rhythmic knocking. I couldn't stop myself. Knock, knock, knock. The moment of clarity became foggy again, not as much as before, but no longer crystal clear. When Mina finished speaking, I politely applauded along with everyone else. The clink of knives on glass sounded throughout the hall. Axel pulled Mina's face to his, and I left the table again. Mina found me in the wardrobe. Her voice floated among the hanging clothes, winding between them like the wind through the trees. Suzulie? I held my breath, hoping she wouldn't look behind the second row of coats, praying she wouldn't see me sitting in the corner on the floor with tears in my eyes. There were 1,000 reasons why I didn't want to be found, most of them related to my feelings for Axel. A few were because it was Mina's wedding day, and she shouldn't have to deal with a crying bridesmaid. This was supposed to be her day. When she appeared at the end of the row of coats, I thought maybe she would just walk past me. Perhaps I could hide behind the pile of coats in the corner, a sad, forgotten lump of fabric, invisible and imperceptible, worth more as a mere pile of rags than as a person with my inclusion. "What's wrong? Are you crying?" she asked. "No," I said, wiping my cheeks furiously as Mina moved down the row, the skirt of her dress trailing behind her. "Suzulie, what's wrong?" "Nothing," I replied. "You're lying," she said, good-naturedly. Before I knew it, she was down on the floor next to me, her skirt flying around her legs as she settled beside me. "Mina, your dress." "It's just a dress," she said, taking my hand. "Why are you crying?" "Because you married the only man I ever loved," I said. "Ever thought about. And I can't have him. And it hurts, Mina. It hurts like hell. It would be easier to just die. That would be enough." "Suzulie, if you can hear me," Mina said softly, "why should I say it out loud?" She looked at me silently, without reaction. My face turned red. "Suzulie, it's your wedding day. Do not worry about it. You're my best friend. Please tell me you don't." "You know," I said, barely able to get the words out. "Don't be angry," Mina whispered. "But it's because you are." "Lonely, yes," I breathed. "Of course. I wish I had someone. Not like Axel, obviously, but I wish I had what you have with him." Well played, Suzulie, I thought. It didn't sound suspicious at all. "You're a expletive idiot." She pretended to take my words at face value and put her arm around my shoulder. "I'm sorry," she purred. "I know it must be hard." "Please don't apologize," I said. "It's your wedding day, and I'm so happy for you. I just needed a moment." "Let's spend this moment together," she said. "I need a break from the chaos too." She sat with me for a minute and then another. Her closeness was comforting. I rested my head on her shoulder as we sat on the floor of the closet, listening to her breathing and convincing myself that if I couldn't have him, at least it was Mina. "I'll find you a guy," she suddenly said. "What?" I straightened up, turning my head to look at Mina. She smiled, her eyes sparkling as she took my hand. "I know the perfect person." She really did know someone, but I doubted she would arrange a date for me with her husband. Still, I squeezed her hand, smiled, and said I liked it. The man she introduced me to was the exact opposite of Axel. If Axel was the exact opposite of himself in every way, where Axel had eyes of ice, Blaine's were warm and hazel. Axel's hair was the darkest shade of red that could still be called red. Blaine's hair looked like it was spun from sun rays and gold. Axel was tall, gloomy, and dark. Blaine was big, funny, and lively. Blaine was everything I thought was right for me before Axel. After Axel, he was acceptable. My feelings for Blaine were difficult to describe in words. I couldn't say that I loved him. What I knew as love was meant for Axel. This feeling was not love, not really, but I didn't know what love was. However, Blaine was there. He was attractive enough, seemed kind enough, and was good enough in bed that I really couldn't complain. Mina introduced us 2 weeks after the wedding. They worked together before Mina opened her studio, teaching various fitness classes at the same gym. Mina taught yoga, Blaine taught strength training. We met for dinner at a bar near my basement apartment. I was supposed to meet him at 7:30 but arrived closer to 8. "Sorry I'm late," I said. Blaine smiled at me across the table. "No problem. Are you late to work?" "No, I just didn't want to come." "Yeah, something like that. It happens. I hope you don't mind, but I ordered a drink while I was waiting." "Not at all," I said. I called the waitress. "Let me catch up with you." He laughed lightly and joyfully. "That's what I like to hear." We ate and talked well. Blaine spoke, I listened, lost in thought about the topics being discussed until he frowned and tapped the table. "Hey, if you don't like this date, that's fine. But I like it," I said quickly, my face turned red as I twirled my fingers on the table. "Sorry, had a rough day. I think I miss you. You're a little quiet." "It makes me want to know what's on your mind," he said, smiling, his teeth almost sparkling from the charm he tried to radiate. I bit my lip, smiling. Blaine must have thought his charm had worked. In fact, it only convinced me that Blaine couldn't read my mind and therefore might actually be the perfect man for me. We had some more drinks, and I started talking a little, telling him about my writing and work and how it was all I really had. We talked about movies and TV shows. I asked him about books, but Blaine said he didn't read much. We drank more and more until several hours had passed and we left the bar, staggering. Blaine said as I put my arm around his shoulder. We both leaned on each other to avoid falling on the sidewalk. "There," I said, pointing in the general direction of my house. "Are you inviting me to your place?" "No, I'm telling you to come with me." We both laughed hysterically and swayed along the sidewalk. He followed me, lips pressed together in a kiss as the basement door slammed shut behind us. Before I could turn on the light, he began to take off my jacket, sliding it off my arms as I tugged at the hem of his shirt. "Damn, you're impatient," he whispered. As I gave into his shirt and began unbuckling his belt, he asked, "Is this a complaint?" He reached for the light as we crossed the bedroom, but I grabbed his wrist. "I like the dark," I whispered. He laughed, and his hands found my bra strap and unclasped it. "A bit of a pervert, Susie." "You don't know half of it," I said. "Can I stay the night?" he whispered. "Yes," I said. He stayed that night and the next, and after that, he complained that it was too hot in my basement and suggested that I come to his place next time. I agreed, and from then on, we spent every few nights together at his apartment. He wasn't Axel, no one else was Axel. But since I couldn't have Axel, I settled down with Blaine. I settled into comfort, acceptable night, and an easy, casual relationship. He was good to me, mostly, and I tried to be good to him. We started seeing Mina and Axel more often. Mina regularly invited us to dinner, or we went to the movies together. Blaine and Axel got along well enough, although Axel was so quiet that it was hard to tell if Blaine actually liked him. Every time we went out together, I tried to hold Blaine's hand and kiss him as often as I could without it seeming intrusive. It didn't prove anything to anyone but myself, and since it didn't really prove anything to me, I wasn't sure why I was doing it. I just needed to show myself that I was with Blaine only and that Axel was never an option. It wasn't a cure for my illness, but at least I could control the symptoms. I still pictured Axel almost every time Blaine and I made love, but the pain began to fade, and finally just become a quiet tingle in the back of my mind whenever I saw him. 6 months had passed. Mina and Axel bought a house together and moved out of the apartment we shared. Mina's studio opened and was a resounding success. Axel was still Axel. He didn't talk much to anyone and didn't talk to me at all. I was still working at the art store. I dated Blaine because it was convenient. I felt comfortable with him, but I didn't notice any subtle changes. He wanted to have an intimate all the time. Every time I saw him, he wanted to have a night. It didn't matter if I was tired or hadn't showered or whatever. That didn't stop Blaine. It was easier to just let him. I thought about Axel. I didn't notice how he sighed heavily or how his touch became harder and harder, trying to get me to react, trying to pull me out of the place of numbness I was lost in. I was lost in my thoughts for hours and hours. I thought about Axel. It didn't really hurt anymore, it was almost a comfort. It was like pouring milk into coffee before adding sugar. It was what I always did. It never occurred to me to add sugar before the milk, just as it never occurred to me to stop thinking about Axel. Even seeing him in person was no longer difficult. His brightness faded, the fire of his hair dimmed, and the ice of his eyes melted until he seemed gray to me. Everyone seemed gray to me, gray, boring, and uninspiring. "What is this?" Blaine asked one night, picking up a notebook that was sitting on his coffee table. "Poems," I said. "Yours?" I shrugged. "I tried to write." He leafed through the book, raising an eyebrow after eyebrow as he read my words. Are they good?" I shrugged again. They were terrible, but Blaine didn't know enough about poetry or language in general to have the slightest idea of what good poetry was. "Are you going to publish them?" "Probably not." "Maybe we should think about a career or something." I didn't answer, and Blaine muttered, rolling his eyes. "Ready?" he asked a little later. I didn't move from the sofa. "Yes." He raised his eyebrow at me. "Susie, I wish you would try at least a little harder when we go out in public." You know, those words should have hurt me. Instead, they were met with indifference, I said. I shrugged again, went into his bathroom, cleaned myself up a bit, and then joined him in the kitchen. "Acceptable?" I asked. "What's wrong with you lately? Are you mad at me or something?" I shook my head. He sighed. "Okay, let's go." He drove me to the restaurant where we met Mina and Axel. After he parked the car, he grabbed my wrist before I could open the door. "I don't know what's on your mind, but cheer up. Don't embarrass me in front of Mina and Axel, got it?" I looked at him for a minute, a long minute, in which I tried to evoke some feeling, anger, fear, humiliation, confusion, anything. A spark of anger almost flared, but died down into apathy when I looked into Blaine's eyes. "Got it," I muttered. He let go of my wrist, and I opened the car door. Mina and Axel were already sitting at the table. Blaine changed as soon as he saw them. "How's my favorite yoga teacher?" he said cheerfully as Mina stood up to hug him. "Great, thanks." "How's my favorite fitness trainer?" she asked. He muttered something, and she laughed before releasing him from the hug. "Susie, how are you?" "Fine," I said. She hugged me, then looked me up and down, her eyes clouded with concern. "Fine," she repeated. "Yes, okay," I said. Axel surprised us all by greeting us warmly, smiling as he stood up to shake Blaine's hand. Then, without warning, he hugged me. The numbness went away. The world filled with color, and my heart began to beat wildly as his body touched mine. 6 months of pain, love, desire, and obsession came back suddenly and powerfully, rushing over me, surrounding me, and passing through me like a waterfall. Oh no, oh no, oh no, oh no, oh no, oh no, A high-pitched laugh burst from my chest. Blaine's face twisted in disgust as he watched, and Axel let go of me. "Sorry," I babbled. It was unexpected. "Hello, Axel, good to see you." "Sorry, you just surprised me, that's all." Nothing like that." "Sorry." Mina laughed. "What are you sorry for?" "For a strange laugh," I said. I felt my cheeks turn red and fell into the empty chair next to Blaine. Axel didn't seem to notice my awkward state, or if he did, he ignored it and sat back down. The air around him seemed to pulsate and vibrate, radiating possibility. He looked at Mina with longing. She caught his eye, and her face tightened before she laughed again. "Just tell them we have news," Axel said immediately. Mina touched his arm, and he jumped slightly. After a moment, he relaxed, turning his palm up to clasp it with hers. "News?" I repeated. Mina pursed her lips. A hidden secret sparkled in her golden brown eyes as she looked at Axel. "We're expecting a baby," he said. It may have just been in my head, but it felt like the world stood still for a moment, a beat, a heartbeat, a long moment of processing, turning the words around in my head. Baby, 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 baby. They're expecting a baby. Blaine looked at Mina. I knew this because I snapped out of my stupor first and let out another hysterical laugh as I grabbed his forearm. "Baby, I can't believe it." My voice was shrill, shaky, and shocked. Blaine came to his senses when I looked at him. He tore his eyes away from Mina and smiled widely. "Damn, man, congratulations." He jumped up from his seat, patted Axel on the back, then leaned over and kissed Mina on the cheek. "Congratulations, Mommy," she said, dabbing at the corner of her eye with a napkin. "It's still very early," she said quietly. "It's very early, so just don't tell anyone yet, okay? Just in case, if something happens." "Nothing will happen," Axel said, his voice low and booming as he squeezed Mina's hand. There was a tiny bit of shyness among them, a small hint that something was wrong, or maybe it was the dam that was holding my emotions back that burst, flooding me with feelings. It brought back all the sadness, obsession, and suspicion, and added a few new things like jealousy, despair, and longing, so much longing. It was well possible that I was just imagining the sudden tension, praying that there was a crack in the wall, and then wallowing in the guilt I felt for wanting such a thing. I spent the rest of the evening absorbed in thoughts of children. I couldn't imagine what Mina and Axel's children would be like. Will they have Axel's hair? Probably not. The red color would be lost under Mina's jeans, just like his blue eyes. His fire and ice would be lost, drowned in the enveloping waters that make up Mina. Maybe the baby would have Axel's face, but I couldn't reconcile Axel's strong bones with Mina's earthy tones. If Axel and I had children, they would be beautiful, his red hair with my green eyes, or my black hair with his blue eyes. We would have children who looked like characters from fairy tales, children with flawless pale skin, beautiful faces, and small curved noses. People would look at our children, extraordinary little creatures of unearthly beauty, and they would be jealous, amazed, and delighted that one little creature could be so perfectly formed. If Blaine and I had kids, they'd be cute, I guess, cute in the way that all mothers think their children are cute. The evening passed in the blink of an eye. When I finally got the image of tiny, fairy-like children with red hair and green eyes out of my head, Blaine was pulling into the parking lot of his apartment. "You're staying?" he asked. I nodded and followed him inside. "So, this is interesting," I said casually as we dusted off our coats. Blaine chuckled in response. "What do you think? Boy or girl?" He shrugged. "What do you think it will look like?" "Probably like Mina, I think," I said. "But maybe it is." "Would you just shut up about the damn baby, Suzalie?" Blaine cut me off. I pulled back, my mouth hanging open and unspoken words hanging from my lips. Blaine looked at me with cold, angry eyes before laughing awkwardly. "I can't keep you talking all damn night, and now you just want to talk about the baby." He grabbed me roughly and kissed me so hard that I thought my lips were bruised, cracked, or bleeding. I resisted, pressing against his chest. "Blaine, wait." Don't keep me waiting, he demanded. I had been so wrapped up in myself all evening that I didn't notice the change in Blaine, the tension running through his muscles, the whiteness of his knuckles, the hard line of his jaw as he clenched his teeth. It wasn't until those tight muscles grabbed me in his arms that I really noticed. Stop, I breathed. He didn't. Blaine, stop. I shouted, pushing him as hard as I could. I don't remember what happened between us. Maybe I don't want to remember. The door slammed behind me, and I ran. I ran, rushed down the corridor, up the stairs, and into the street, past passers-by. My shoes clicked on the pavement, creating a rhythm of fear and anger, my thoughts humming in the background in a twisted a cappella. He hit me, I hit him, he hit me, I hit him. The words swirled and rose, bubbling and boiling and spilling out of my eyes. When I finally had to stop and catch my breath, leaning over and breathing deeply while my lungs burned and my body screamed, they coalesced into one clear thought: Axel wouldn't do this to me. I hid in my basement for a week. My boss fired me after I didn't show up for work 3 days in a row. He left a message on my voicemail because I refused to answer my calls. Mina called several times. I didn't answer her either. The first message she left was full of sympathy. Hi Susie, this is Mina. Sorry I didn't get through. Blaine says you two broke up, and I just wanted to see how you were. I'm so sorry it didn't work out for you. You seemed so happy the other time, but you've got to do what's best for you. Call me back when you can and let me know you're okay. Love you. The next message arrived 2 days later. What do you think of our first part of the story today? It seems to me that the conflict between husband and wife was only the beginning and there are more interesting events to come. What's your opinion? Write in the comments. Until new videos.